I think the most expensive mistake by far comes with mistiming hires.
Mm.
So it's very, very tempting to say, oh, we want to expand our capacity, and so we're going to hire someone.
Every agency founder thinks they have a sales problem. Most have a visibility problem. They don't see what's happening inside the business until it's too late. Pipeline looks healthy until revenue drop. Hiring feels right until the margin strings. Team stays busy, but profits don't grow. After nearly a decade, helping US agencies solve these challenges through consulting, Stanton realized the real issue wasn't leadership. Agencies were making multi-million-dollar decisions with disconnected spreadsheets, gut instinct, and outdated data. So she stepped away from a successful consulting business to build the software she wished every agency had. This episode explores why. So, Pen, welcome to Utopia Decision Room podcast. For people meeting you for the first time, tell us a little bit about yourself and what Studio Forecast does.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I have been working in the creative agency business for the last 16 years of my career. And a lot of that has been focused on helping make sure that agencies are maintaining their margins through working and running projects and building client relationships, and then also helping agencies effectively staff and estimate their work, which is really kind of the guts of a lot of the operational work that we do. So that's what I've been focusing on in both my consulting practice and also when I work with full-time with agencies as a COO. So it's really rewarding work, but it's also a challenge because we see a lot of the same pain points across a lot of different agencies. And that's part of what's inspired me to be here chatting with you guys today.
That sounds amazing. So you spent close to a decade as a fractional COO, going in as the person brought in to fix agencies from the outside.
Yes.
So Tiny Monster gave you a very stable, respected practice that you could continue on for many, many years, but instead you decided to step away from it to build a software. What made you decide to choose the switch after so many years?
Really, it was grounded in the realization that a lot of these agencies, if not all of them, and when I talk about the agencies, the smaller independent shops that are probably 50 people or fewer and often growing rapidly, all of these agencies are experiencing very similar pain points across these moments of growth. And I was realizing I was solving the same challenges over and over again. And with the advent of the advanced computing powers that we have now, with AI being accessible through Anthropic and OpenAI, we realized that a lot of those challenges could be solved at scale through a piece of software rather than having an agency rely on in-depth consultative, practically one-on-one experience, which really doesn't scale. And my hope is to be able to help as many agencies as possible. So that was the inspiration for that move. Although I do love speaking with agencies about their business, so I will always be having those conversations happily.
Nice. So agencies are usually very chaotic on the inside. There are tons of problems every day and nothing ever gets solved. So what is one very common problem that you see happens daily and it doesn't get solved no matter what?
Oh man. I would say due to the cyclical nature of the business that agencies run and the project-based nature of agency work, that balance of making sure that aces are in places, so having the right team in the right role for the right amount of time, is a perennial challenge for agencies. And then I'd say a close second to that is making sure that you really have, and any agency leader has a really strong understanding of the work that they're doing and what that work requires in terms of level of effort for their team in order to sort of like get the right deliverable out to the client and help the clients meet their business goals. So I would say the two major pain points that I'm constantly solving for are the fact that all of the estimates that we work on are typically done in spreadsheets and aren't really often scientific, which then sets up projects to be, you have to be sort of constantly working around what you estimated, right? So if you have a good estimate, you can have a good project. If you have a bad estimate, it's really difficult to run a good project, and then make sure that your staffing is in balance. So I think these are really sort of the day-to-day challenges that founders face, agency operators face.
Exactly, especially when you get more projects, then it gets, because you need the right allocation to certain projects with different timelines.
Absolutely. And so if you have an estimate that says, oh, we're going to get something done in 6 weeks, and you have all of your estimates saying that, but then all of a sudden all of your projects are now 12 weeks because the estimate was inaccurate or there was scope increase, which we always hope happens in a way that is moving the business forward. And then trying to do that times however many is a huge challenge. And often that work, just to add to the complexity of it, it's very, very common for these small agencies to wind up with a whole lot of work sort of all at once. And so growth can happen very quickly, and you don't really realize that it's happened until you're already a month deep into it. And so it can make the complexity of the business feel like it changes overnight, which is also, that's more of an art to managing it than more of a science. So
exactly. And you spent 15 years inside agency, so you understand what actually drive performances. You mentioned like the right tracking versus what founders think might drive performances. So do you think that what you used to believe drive performances change with AI now?
Yes. And I think it's challenging the agency, not just the agency world, but I would say the professional services world, or any business model that operates on a project and time-based as pricing. This is something that everybody in the industry is talking about right now, because we are so used to equating our deliverables with the amount of time that it takes us to create them. And AI is really causing us and prompting us collectively to update our thinking on that. And so a lot of the typical agency health metrics are going, I think, and are currently being, but will actively be disruptive in the industry or disrupted in the industry over the next 2 to 3 years, as procurement pressures and buying pressures continue to push down our rates, which is completely understandable. And also as people find more ways of utilizing these tools in a manner that's propulsive or supercharges the way that we've been doing our work. So I think that entire metric set is going to need to be interrogated and updated. And I've been having some really rewarding and truly fascinating with conversations with agencies that are sort of on the vanguard of this, who are in our beta group, because they recognize that this is something that's happening right now, and could either be a competitive angle for them, or it could be something that could really challenge the business in a way that would probably be more stressful than energizing.
Exactly. And now with lean teams, you can scale with the same speed compared to before. So what is the most expensive mistake from your years as a operations consultant you see that founders make? Like, what is the most expensive mistakes you see founders make when they scale from a small team to a larger team?
I think the most expensive mistake by far comes with mistiming hires. So it's very, very tempting because, our effort is directly related to our revenue in the agency space. It's very tempting to say, oh, we want to expand our capacity, and so we're going to hire someone. But every time you hire someone, you're increasing your capacity, which is great. So your capacity for billable work, but you're also increasing the fixed cost on your bottom line. And then you were carrying the responsibility of covering that cost. So it's going to have implications for your company margin if you are not able to consistently keep that person billable, i.e. reimbursed by the client. So one of the things that I see is a lot of, especially when there's a busyness level happening, an increased busyness level, there's that instinct of, oh, well, why don't we bring someone on full time? And there's a lot of qualitative reasons why we would want to be doing that. It helps with the client relationship, it helps with the velocity and arguably the quality of the team, although there are very good freelancers out there. But you know, people like working with people that they know, and there's a lot to be said about team dynamics increasing the quality, effectiveness, and efficiency of the work, right? But when we see founders get very excited about the potential growth of their organization, oftentimes I don't see we land one piece of work where it's going to keep someone busy for 3 months, but then what happens after that? And so there's implications for how much you sell and how busy you're going to keep someone and all these kinds of things. So I'd say the number one thing is optimistic full-time hires when not fully balancing out the pipeline and looking at your revenue and future utilization. Or of course, that's the key metric now.
Yeah.
Could very easily change.
Yeah. So would it be better for a founder who is scaling to hire part-times or contractors when they're scaling instead of directly full-timers?
That's often the recommendation that I bring to the folks that I consult with. Reason being, if you look at your full-time, the expense that your full-time person puts on your books for your fiscal year, that ultimately can wind up being more expensive than if you're just comparing a full-time person's loaded rate per hour versus a freelancer's loaded rate per hour, right? So if you just look at it just on an hourly basis or on a contractual basis, you'd say, oh, freelancers are more expensive. Right. And there is a way in which freelancers can be more expensive than full-time. But when you're looking at the full-time person over the balance of the year and the potential of their billable hours being lower over a period of time, there's a very good chance that full-time hire will actually be more expensive for you if you're looking over the long term, i.e. the fiscal year, we'll just say, or the half or the quarter, versus just on the per project basis. So I would very much encourage, and I do encourage the founders that I work with to really look at the time scale and look at your revenue capacity as well as your new business pipeline and your current booked revenue when you're making these hiring decisions. It's often very hard to see further out than a couple of months, depending on how long your projects are. But going through the rigor of that exercise is something that can really help keep your margins in line. And when you work with the same freelancers consistently for a set period of time, you do develop those relationships, and you can say like, oh, I'll give you right of first refusal on a project, or I'll call you, or keep me posted. We've worked over several agencies over the last however many years. We've definitely had relationships with folks who are very happy to be full-time freelancers, and that's their business. They have an LLC, and we have relationships with them. So, and we're seeing that in the market as well. There are a couple of our design partners who have basically fewer than 10 full-time employees, but they're going to be doing probably close to $10 million in revenue this year because they work with a known pool of freelancers, and that's how they're able to maintain their margins and maintain their cost to revenue ratio in a way that's healthy. So there's all sorts of ways that you can be managing it, but it's something that we're seeing. And there's so many really talented people on the market right now, it wouldn't compromise work to bring in folks while managing through I'd say a tumultuous market on the business side.
Yeah, exactly. And I think freelancers also, they prefer a stable full-time employer who can guarantee like permanent freelancing opportunities. So they'll really put in more of the effort and the work.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And, you know, everyone takes pride in their work. And I think, you know, especially the people who work as freelance full-time really recognize the value of the relationships that they have. And I find those to be not transactional relationships at all, in the way that sort of when you say like, oh, they're a freelancer, it's like, well, they're a trusted partner of ours that we bring in when we know the work is exactly right for them. And we value, you know, when we value their expertise. So that's is one of the things that I really enjoy about this industry.
Yeah, it is. So like when you used to be a fractional COO, people
Mhm.
bring you in because they trust your judgment and expertise and experience. But now you're building a software, so it
Mhm.
requires something completely different, like different positioning. You're not selling your
Mhm.
experience, but
Mhm.
you're selling a product.
Yes.
So what do you think changed and how did you manage the change, like the switch?
Well, it's in progress.
Huh?
Um, One of the things that I've been doing that's been very rewarding, both for the product side, but then also for the conversations that I feel like I'm being able to have, is being able to go to conferences or participate in conversations like this, or have, um, you know, thought pieces published in various industry publications, is really a way to continue to participate in the conversation with the industry. Having a conversation that's broader and able to have these discussions of like, oh, well, how might we reevaluate our business models so that we're decoupling our hours from our pricing, right? So having, and that, being able to participate in those conversations versus I'm going to be in the weeds with you solving your direct operational problems. It's sort of the scale of the conversation is starting to change because the tool is there to help solve the operational problems. That being said, one of the things that I'm enjoying about the work right now is that with all of our design partners in our beta program, I'm able to sit and still have conversations with them about their business. So, for example, yesterday we had a session with a CEO who's been working with us for some time in the tool, and we were talking exactly about this. She was like, well, looking at the estimator that you guys are, that we're building out and have built with the AI capabilities that it has, she's saying like, well, we really have this smattering of offerings, and so one pricing model doesn't fit all. And so we're like, great, let's talk about how that shows up in the tool and how we can make that work for you guys. So there's this really interesting sort of funnel now between the conversations that I'm having with the industry writ large, and then how that can be reflected back into the tool so that it can be manifested in the day to day. So for the price of our subscription, that's available to more people versus someone coming to me and me saying, okay, well, my monthly rate for you is this, and you only get so many hours of my time. So it's nice to sort of help the industry solve problems at scale and identify like a newer edge of problems that can then get translated into this
So basically,
scaling platform.
so basically to make this available to a larger group of people who needs it.
Yeah.
Did you have to give up to make this switch? Like being a founder.
Yeah. I would say I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, and so I love this question. What I've given up in a large part is my comfort zone,
Yeah.
or being able to operate from a position of expertise 24/7, right? Because when you're a consultant and you're working, especially in a fractional capacity, you are being hired, as you were saying earlier, you're being hired for your expertise. So you can say with a certain degree of surety almost all the time, like, in my experience, here's best practices, here's ways of solving this problem. And then there's a little bit of creativity that goes into working one-on-one with founders and helping them solve for their particular business and circumstances. Becoming a founder for a 0 to 1 B2B SaaS tool in the age of AI has a lot of unknowns for me. And fortunately, there are playbooks and there are advisors who can help with this. But now I spend maybe a quarter of my time or half of my time in my comfort zone, speaking from a position of expertise. And that's usually when we're talking to our users and sort of making sure that we're hitting the value claims of the product. And then the rest of the time, I'm learning an entirely different job, which,
Very
has
relatable.
transferable skills from a previous one, but I have to get very comfortable with the fact that, as a first-time founder, but not first-time executive, I'm a new skill set in this new world. So I just have to say, like, I've given up my comfort zone, which is both invigorating and
Yeah.
nerve-wracking at the same
Yeah.
time. So,
Yeah.
but worthwhile.
Yeah. Also, being a founder makes you realize that there are a lot more things that you don't know, and somehow you have to
Absolutely.
learn. Like there's no choice.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. And learning, I would say, the art of the pivot,
Yeah.
doing this particular type of work. It's well documented, well stated that many successful companies pivot before they become what they are. For example, we were researching this earlier this month. I didn't know this, but Slack started as, I believe, a video game messaging tool,
Yeah.
and now it is what it is, right? So
As
they're very
well.
famous. There are a lot of famous examples like that, and so learning to that, and not feeling like you're sort of burning everything down to start again, or confidence and faith that that's the right activity, is a very different skill set, I would have to say, than being in operations, where often I am being hired to build. And the game is setting the right foundation and the right order to make sure that the company has stability to grow from, so that the pivots or the fluctuations of the business aren't taking everybody through whiplash. So it's different. It's a different skill set for sure.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty as well.
Yeah.
And most AI infrastructure, they chase enterprise companies, but what they're is specifically targeting agencies with smaller contracts, scrappier and messier operations, and tighter margins. Like, why do you choose this group of people instead of going for the big giants?
I think at this point, and this is we ask ourselves this question a lot. And in experience with the agency industry, there's I think there's a very large group of very talented people who have agencies, especially creative agencies, sort of grow up around their talent and the quality of their client relationships. I can think of like 4 or 5 of these agencies just right off the top of my head. Creative strategy, brand strategy, naming, all sorts of very, very people who this is set to up a client portfolio. Not all of those people have the benefit of having business partners who are going to help them with the operational side of their business. And the failure rate, as we know, for small firms in general across the US, like the failure rate for small businesses within the first 5 years is very high. And I feel as though we have the computing capability now with AI to help these founders navigate that part of the business without having to have a co-founder or a business manager who can help. I mean, a CPA is always going to be helpful, and you should always have a CPA. But someone who can sit there and say like, oh, maybe that hire would be a little expensive, or maybe we should be thinking about just be freelance for a little while, or hey, we could probably continue to work with XYZ client if we brought in a partner who we could do a joint deal with, like just kind of think through those elements of the business. I think that's something, I think it's a market that's been historically underserved. So I'm keen to help with that. And when we were doing our market research, we saw that of all of the north of 100,000 small agency, independent agencies just in the US, something like 80 to 90% of those agencies are 30 people or fewer, because there are a lot of, onesie twosie, what we would call like micro agencies. And they don't have the ability to buy massive pieces of software. And it honestly doesn't make sense for them to buy massive pieces of software. So it just felt like an underserved market with a lot of potential for assistance and sustainability. So that's the thesis behind our market. So
definitely. I just came from an agency background a long time ago, and most of them will have very tight margins. So they need the tools that the big organizations are using, but they just don't have enough budget to purchase it. So there must be something mid-level but offers the same value and usage that they can leverage.
Exactly. We know that there's a lot of tools out there right now. So it's it's very easy to be overwhelmed by all of the options. So we've been trying to strike that balance between wanting to make sure that we're providing the right functional set for this group of agencies that are a smaller independent firm, without feeling like it's like, oh, just one more thing that they have to build or they have to switch over from trusted tools. So we're relying a lot on having integrations in the tool and making sure that really the value prop is having the right workflow and the right life cycle represented in the project, so that people don't feel like they have to run out and build a whole bunch of agents or connections independently in order to like make sense of their business. Like, we want to help people make sense of their business and maintain their margins. Like, everybody works in the agency world, people work very hard for their money, and we want to make sure they keep as much of it as possible.
Yeah, I can also agree that people from agencies or small, medium businesses, they are more loyal customers. Once they adopt a tool, they will continue using it unless it breaks or unless it's too expensive. If not, they will just continue because it's easier than to change, and they don't explore new tools.
Absolutely. That's and something that and it's an interesting moment in the industry for that. All of the opportunities that AI is presenting for our tool set. And I say this across creative, across computing, across code, finance, all these different, every facet of the business is being impacted by this, which is amazing. And so it's giving us an opportunity, I think us all collectively, an opportunity to say, okay, where might we in our current workflow be able to adjust and adapt our tool set so that certain things can be done faster, a little bit smarter, a little bit better connected, so that we can then have the opportunity to evolve the way that we work. So I can go on and on about this. And in fact, I did about 6 weeks ago, I gave a talk at Mirren on exactly this topic, but that's another topic for another day.
Yes. And so you came from an operations background and not actually a sales marketing background, and also not an engineering technical background. So it's kind of different to start a company because it's kind of in a very special space. So do you think it's an advantage compared to just being a sales marketing founder or being an engineering founder? Because that's the most common.
Yeah. I think so. So I do have two co-founders who I think I mentioned at the top of the call. One of whom is his area of specialty is product. And then I have a technical co-founder who is architecting and so from my vantage point, because we're building a tool for a very specific industry with a very specific group of people with a very specific need, and that's coming out of the world that I was grown up in professionally, I think that gives us a certain advantage insofar as that the trust levels that I've found when I speak with people tend to be very high, which is helpful, I think, for when you think about tooling adoption. So while we are spending an enormous amount of time speaking to our user group, having beta users who are giving us constant feedback on both the feature sets, but then also our general usability, and validating those that we have, because we're operating from a place that we know very, very I think it gives us an advantage in sales and in our product development cycle. I've been doing a lot of research and reading on what it's like to be a first-time founder. And a lot of the two pieces of advice that I hear often are, almost all the time, is focus on the product, focus on the user. And if you build something that people love and find value in, the rest of the business will follow. And we take that to heart. We're very user-centric. We're very data-driven. And we always want to make sure that shows up in our product, because we're doing this to help the industry. And I think that in and of itself will, that is the story of the sales, right? So I can come in and say to people, I know this industry very well. I know your challenges. I had a demo, anecdotally, I had a demo a few months back where, we were showing the tool, and one of the folks we were talking to looked at it and said, "Oh, I totally recognize what this does. I fully understand why this is here. This in every best way, a improvement on all the staffing tools that we've seen. And I love that it connects to this estimate flow so I can see everything in one place." So they were really understood it, and we don't really have to sell them on the problem. We know the problem from the jump. So that would say that's sort of the benefit. It's we know the users, we can flow that straight into our product, and it creates a very virtuous cycle in our product development. And so, given that we've been around for a little less than a year officially, we've made tremendous progress in build. So I'd say that's something I find as a benefit. And then I just, need to learn how to do the sales work.
Yep. But I think once you can show the users that you can solve their problem, then there's not so much need for sales, because it is something they already need.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the US market, the US software market particularly, is very competitive. Thousands of companies are building with AI, and even more right now. And people are making similar promises for similar products. So how did you stand out with the product that they're building compared to other people who might have a similar product?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of it is coming off of I'd say it's two things. I'd say it's the speed at which we've been able to demonstrate the functionality. So the way that we're building and the way that we're approaching our product development is one, as I said, is very focused on the challenges that our audience have. And being able to go in and say to every member, anyone that I wind up demoing with or speaking with at a conference, is being able to say, we know the ins and outs of this pain that you're experiencing, and being able to demonstrate that both in conversation, but then also in the tool itself, that moves us pretty quickly through the conversation. So I would say, the advice that I would give based on where we are right now is that I'd say find the problem that you know how to solve well and is something that is worth or can be extensible through the technology. And AI is very good at picking up patterns, and it's very good at predictive analysis, and it's good at speeding things up. So recognizing that those are the three things that AI is good at, how can you apply those three benefits to a problem that you know well, that would solved well at scale, or would benefit being solved well at scale? So, which is essentially what we've done. And it's much easier to walk into a room and say, I understand and have deep knowledge of this market, versus casting around for a business idea that you hope pans out, and then you have to spend an enormous amount of time trying to understand your user base, which should be an ongoing practice regardless. So, I think it's tempting to be able to look at the US and say, that's a compelling market and we want to be differentiated in there. And it's that's, yes, great. But I'd say find an old problem that you can apply a new technology to, and make sure you understand what that problem is solving rather than something on spec, and build for that. And that in its own right will be a differentiator.
Yeah. And for people, software founders targeting mid-market, it's so hard to pronounce, mid-market and software businesses, do you think it's difficult to convince them about the new technologies that they should adopt, especially with AI? Because they have always been operating at a very even with AI. If a creative agencies, they don't really need AI so much. They can edit stuff and all these things. Do you think you need to convince them more, or they are already ready for the wave?
I think there is a certain degree of convincing that has to happen. And we've been talking about that a lot. Both in our product development conversations, we've been talking about that with our beta group, and then also at these conferences that I've been going to, and just all the folks that I've been chatting with. It's very difficult for human beings to change their behavior. And fundamentally, AI adoption or transformation is not that dissimilar from when we went through the original wave of digital adoption and transformation in our organizations. And change management is behavior change. And that's very hard for people, especially when you're on a deadline, when you feel one is under pressure to perform. And you want to deliver well for your clients, you want to deliver well for your business, you want to make sure you're hitting your numbers, you want to make sure that no one's working too stressed out, right? Or distracted by something new. And adopting a new workflow, a new tool set, a new process can and does slow everything down until people get used to it, and then it speeds everything up again. So that is, I would say, one of our top challenges in working in the B2B tooling space, is knowing that, especially for the smaller independent agency where the founder is probably really deep in the work, both in the business and on the business, it's going to be very difficult for folks to adopt a new tool. But the nice thing is there's a lot of curiosity around it right now, and everyone is thinking about how they can be doing things differently and effectively. And knowing that our tool is helping speed up the estimation process, help make estimates more accurate to your historicals, but then also accurate to the benchmarks that you want to be hitting. I like to think that, as soon as folks handed an easier way of doing things, the change will come. But it's all about finding that exact sweet spot, which is the journey that we're on right now. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people are also struggling with the change or the pivot. But I think companies that are winning are doing it now or even before everyone start to change, because it's going to be fully changed. So if you start now,
Absolutely. If you start now, you definitely will have a leg up.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've been recommending to the businesses that I've been speaking with are to, one, start with what your clients need. So if you're an agency and your clients, and spend some time thinking about what their business objectives are and how you might be able to help them with their business objectives. And having that understanding and empathy is going to go a long way for building out your bill of offering. And from there, then look at how you go about delivering your highest quality moment of work. Take a couple, everybody has case studies, everybody has an instinctive memory or understanding of what projects went really well and why, and what's were maybe a little more painful than you would have liked and why. Break those down. You can just do whiteboard, quote unquote, whiteboard exercise, where you just map out pros and cons, or the starts and stops, or the good, better, bests of each of these process. And then think about how that process is repeatable, like the one we having is repeatable, and then map your tools to that. And then think of where the tools can speed that up. And from there, and then give yourself space and grace to adopt. Usually what I recommend for agencies and what I guide agencies through with change adoption, especially when it comes to tooling, is think about how you want to be deploying the tool. Set up a couple different parameters. Keep it really lightweight if you're small. This doesn't need to be a difficult. And then give yourself 2 or 3 weeks to practice it, and then say, okay, as of August 1, you could start this tomorrow. As of August 1, I'm going to be using this tool on my day-to-day, and I'm going to retire this entire spreadsheet that I'm working on. Any behavior change, it just takes a little bit of planning and discipline, and in 6 weeks you could be in someplace totally different.
Yeah. And do you believe, based on your experience, that mid-market, small, medium businesses and agencies, they were purchased based on trust in the US? For example, someone else recommending to their friend, telling them to do it before, instead of
Absolutely. I absolutely so, especially with how much is in the market right now. and how easy it is to spin up a tool. People are doing this internally. People are doing this. I've seen a bunch of very, very smart recently, but they're all very clearly Claude coded, which, don't get me wrong, it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's great for proof of concept. But I think showing that something is real, stable, and here to stay, and being very clear about that versus saying, I have a concept. I would love to get your point of view on it. Can you help me take, this is a proof of concept, and just be very clear about where you are in the cycle will help with that trust building, and it will yield the relationships that you may need for that initial word of mouth when you're doing early development. Because people, I think, especially the small agencies, they are willing and they're very curious to pick things up and play with them, but very slow to adopt fully.
So it has to be really super user friendly.
I think so. Yeah.
That's cool. So like you have been doing consulting for 8 years before, so it was really stable and everything was kind of predictable in a sense where you come in with your expertise, you tell them what to do and work. So it is 100% the other way. So
yeah.
What scares you most now being in a software company as a founder?
What scares me the most now? It depends on the day. I would say overall, my own learning curve is the thing that I find the most stimulating and exciting about this work. But it's also the thing that concerns me the most, because I don't ever want my team or my business to be held back by my learning curve. We're all on learning curves. And I think it's very, very healthy to have a growth mindset and be really comfortable with working a job that you've never had before, right? Like I often tell my, friends or my coach, my career coach, I said to them, like, I've never had the same job twice. And I think that allows you to have a really varied and fascinating career, and it allows you to talk to some really interesting people. But the flip side of that is, like, when you wake up every morning, you don't know if things are going the way they're supposed to. So I think operating without a map or operating without a where you're going and only being able to rely on someone else's map to go through territory that is the unknown is but it's also terrifying.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is why the importance of having co-founders that and trust and are there in it with you, and also having a community of people and going to events and finding founder groups that you can be speaking to is very, very good. And I found that this got easier as soon as I started taking that advice.
So like, are these founders groups and your co-founder the people that you go to when you need to make a huge decision in the company or in your life regarding to the business, or is there someone else that you go to?
It's a little bit of everyone. I mean, there's we have a couple of advisors who are very gracious with their time and their expertise. And so we will call them and say, hey, we're at this moment in time. I have friends who've gone through similar processes. And then, we spend a lot of time looking at the data, and we spend a lot of time looking at where we want to be going, making sure our goals are correct, our data and our metrics that we're moving towards are the right ones that are pulling the business forward. And making sure that everybody who we're working with is in a corner, but also going to tell us what we need to know. So, but reaching out to working with you and Utopia and the pods that you guys have, very, very helpful. Having going to where I can say, hey, have you guys been experiencing X, Y, and Z? And I was a couple of weeks ago, and everyone was talking about how the first users were difficult, and I was like, oh, it's just us. Okay. Yeah. I had a person say that, who is now on their second startup, and they said, for their first startup, they had to, quote, fight like hell for their first 10 users. So, knowing that that's just part of the journey is like, oh, great. So find your community, talk to your community, take the advice of your community. And, because everyone that I've spoken with is so encouraging and supportive, and like everybody recognizes that this is hard and they all want to help. Like that's something that's been very surprising to me about this whole process. So
also being around people who are also founding something, it can kind of relate to the problems that you're going through. So most times everyone will be very open-minded to exchange things or just help each other out. I find
Absolutely.
that because they understand how it feels as well when you wake up and you have no idea what's going to happen today.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing that's totally normal just helps when you're for the first time. So it's definitely, it's nice to find the solidarity in the group.
Yeah. And so, like, how did you balance your time when you have two other co-founders, but they're also doing other things like being on a fast company, bots it, and running multiple things at once? Like, do you find you actually work more now, or putting more hours compared to being a consultant?
I would say it's different. Types of hours are different. So for example, I'm spending way more time going to conferences and events and having these discovery calls than I did when I was a consultant, because when consulting, you are into a set of problems for your clients. And this is like, let's get out there and talk to as many people as possible and be active in the community. The other thing that we talk about a lot, my co-founders and I talk about a lot, is prioritization and scoping of our effort. And we want to make sure that we're operating lean, and we want to make sure that the funding that we have goes a long way. I often tell people that I want our dollars to work as hard as possible for us at this stage in the process. And so we talk a lot about the I don't know if you're familiar with the Tube 2 rubric for prioritization. So what is the lowest effort, highest impact activity that you can be doing? Yeah, exactly. So we try to stay laser focused on that, both when we're making product decisions, but also when we're making decisions about our time and how things can be going. And it changes on a weekly basis. So we're having these conversations constantly, not because things are always changing, but it's because we want to make sure that what we decided 2 weeks ago still holds true, and there's not enough data, like an avalanche of insights and information that would cause us to change our approach. So for me right now, for example, highest and best use of my time is these types of conversations, and like I'm very outward facing, and the guys, we have enough users, we have enough people in the mix. The guys are, the product's at a certain place where the highest and best use for the guys' time is to be focusing on making sure we're really nailing the usability and we're really nailing the functionality, and that there is correct and all these types of things. And when I say correct, it's because we want to make sure we're not overburdening our users with really hefty AI bills. So we're making sure that we're, building a stack in a really cost intelligent way, as well as being technically very powerful. And so we're sort of dividing and conquering, whereas previously, I'd say probably at the beginning of this year, we all really needed to be in the mix and talking to people and really focused on product development. Now we can kind of divide and conquer. So, and I'm sure there'll be another point in time where it'll come back together again. So it's just always that sort of ebb and flow and assessment of, there are only so many hours in the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's good that prioritization is important, especially there are endless things to do as a founder. There's always something to do. It's never finished.
Always something to do. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, continue. I was going to say it's kind of like a housewife, but same thing.
It's true. And I, sometimes my dishes get done, but I will say one of the things that I've learned through the years of both being a COO, but then also just working now in this is I need to make sure that part of that schedule includes time to move my body, time to make sure that I'm eating, time to make sure that I'm resting, so that I can show up and be sharp and focused and pay attention. So, there's, I think, a really significant hustle culture around building something from 0 to 1. And part of that, I'm looking forward to that discussion, including these other elements of wellness so that people can show up and be performative and not burn out. Or I should not say performative, high performance without burning out. Because founder burnout is very real. I've seen very burnt out of their jobs, and I've watched their decision-making process degrade over time as a result. So I'm a big believer in finding ways to be successful sustainably, which includes, I think, having the work-life balance that works for your job.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there hour weeks? Absolutely. Are there days where I'm on from 8 to 8 to 9? Absolutely. But
sustainability is an important topic because most startups stop because they get burnout or the cash gets run out, something like that.
Yep.
So it's actually kind of marathon than a sprint.
Exactly. And I think in some ways, going back to one of your earlier questions about how sort of the transition from agency world into product world, I think that's actually something that agency world has very well prepared us for, because we know the business is cyclical and every business is cyclical. And so we have to kind of make sure that we keep that in mind because it is a marathon. So we have to just be pacing ourselves and know that when it's a little bit quieter, we can rest. And when it's really busy, it's going to be busy, but that'll die down. And, so.
Yeah, exactly. That's really important as well for health. So I've got one last question for this podcast.
Yeah.
If there's another fractional COO like you who would like to start a software company of their own or like skip the consulting and venture out into the leap, like what is one piece of advice you would give them that you wish someone told you before?
Yeah. I would say don't think about developing the product and having your consultancy as two separate things. Take the time to think through and develop and prototype the product in the context of your consultancy before going out and making making the full switch. It worked out for me in that time, and that was just the transition that I was making, and that it just what panned out for us. But I think it would in a way that would be helpful to think of them as two sides of the same coin rather than separate endeavors.
Means to integrate and merge the expertise.
Exactly. Something that a lot of agencies are trying to do. They're trying to productize their work. And so I would say think about the productization as part of your consulting practice and then make the shift potentially that way. It'll feel slow, but ultimately I think it'll speed up the product process in a way that maybe we didn't do. I mean, my prototype I used for years was a static workbook, which, maybe could have been more of a Claude coded thing. I mean, if I were doing it now, that's what it would be. But so that was something I would say, like, use the technologies that are available to test it and take it that as far as it can go before you expand out, because then you'll have a user base, and use your client list and be very upfront with your clients, and which is basically what I've done. But there's been distance between when I was consulting with them and now, and so I'm having lovely catch-up conversations with everyone, but it's different.
Yeah, for sure. That's really good advice and useful for anyone out there, especially CEO who are planning to venture. So thanks, Pen, for joining the podcast, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. It was great chatting with you, and I love all these questions.